Where did we learn about it?
33.3.
This section's longer.
Okay. I'm going to teach you about the adaptive immunity, the way that works. And I'm going to do it up here showing you with these models. I think it helps people learn the best, okay? So when you're filming this, you may have to get close up on some of these because some of these things are small.
All right.
You know how to zoom and everything?
Yeah.
You may want to slide your desk forward and be beside these two guys.
There.
Look at you.
Good?
Let's look at the element.
It's a macrophage.
A camera
It's like
can
an
shake.
eel, doesn't it? Like a little eye.
Yeah.
Like,
I
it's
watch
really
these
evident.
anyways.
Yeah.
You want to scoot a bit more? I'll hold it. Go on, scoot on up, man.
And it's got
All right.
Scoot on up.
This is going to represent a virus.
That's good. All right.
Everybody look up here now. Y'all need to be paying attention here. This is going to represent a virus. Now, a virus has an outer coat made of protein and DNA or RNA on the inside, some nucleic acid on the inside. And I've made this virus so that it has little spikes on its outer surface. Those little spikes have a name. They're called antigens. An antigen is any kind of protein that causes any kind of foreign protein that can be present in an organism. An antigen. It actually doesn't have to be foreign. It's just a protein on the surface of a virus or a cell. That's what an antigen is. A protein on the surface of a virus or a cell. And let's say you're kissing somebody who's sick, and you get a virus inside your throat. And let's say the virus moves into one of your throat cells. These are throat cells. And the virus gets in one of them. What's the virus going to do inside that cell? It's going to instruct the cell to make more viruses. And the cell will start putting together more viruses. And eventually, the cell will blow up. Are you hanging with me here, Steph?
Yeah.
And release the new viruses. Where some of them can then infect another cell. And you can see where this could get out of control rather quickly. If each new cell that's infected is making more viruses, pretty soon all your cells can be infected with viruses. And every time the viruses burst out, they kill the cell. So that could end up killing every cell in the creature, and the organism could die. Are y'all with me so far? So how are we going to stop this? Well, you have immune cells like macrophages that'll crawl out of your bloodstream and look for undesirables like this. And eat them. Engulf them and eat them. And they can eat up a certain number of viruses, but they're not going to be able to catch them all. Because I kind of like to think about them like tanks and bees. The viruses are small like bees, and they can move about, and there's a whole lot of them. And well, they don't move on their own, I shouldn't say that, but they're floating around in the body's fluids, and there's a lot of them. The macrophages are kind of like tanks. They're a lot bigger. It's hard for tanks to catch bees. Have you ever noticed? If you were trying to catch bees, it would be hard to catch a bunch of them in a tank. Every once in a while, you get lucky and roll over a few, and that's what this thing does. We have two problems here. We have to kill the viruses that are inside cells, and we have to kill the viruses that are outside cells. And what we're going to do to be able to do that is use our B cells and our T cells. There are two types of white blood cells, which are also called lymphocytes. There are two types of lymphocytes that are going to help us kill these viruses. Again, we got to kill the floating around viruses, and we got to kill the ones that are inside cells. Now, a cell does an interesting thing when it's been invaded by a virus. Y'all got to listen up here. Savannah, you with me? No?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Are you looking?
Yes, sir.
When a cell gets invaded by a virus, it does an interesting thing. As it's creating new viruses, it takes some of the antigens that it's making and it displays them on the surface of its cell. Kind of like a little flag saying, I'm under attack. Kill me.
I'm under attack.
These are the antigens that are on the surface of the virus.
And the macrophages come and eat this thing.
Okay? Those will be important in just a few minutes. Every cell that's infected by a virus, this one's already dead, but let's say this one's infected too, will display an antigen or several on its surface. Cells have been programmed to do that to survive. Now, the macrophage, interestingly, whenever it happens to catch a virus, it will also tear the virus into pieces and display one of its antigens on its surface. Kind of like a trophy showing what the macrophage has killed before. Pretty cool, huh?
Why does he do that?
I'm going to show you. Very interesting. And the macrophage will eventually make its way up to a lymph node. This circular thing is a lymph node, where lots of white blood cells reside. T cells and B cells. Now you got to keep in mind there isn't just one macrophage, there's a lot of them. There's not just one lymph node, there's a lot of them. And so these macrophages are just eating whatever they come into contact with and eventually bump around and just eventually make their way into one of the lymph nodes. And inside the lymph nodes, they will bump into some of the T cells. Remember, we call them T cells because they matured in the thymus gland. Do you remember that?
And T is short for thymus cells?
T is short for thymus. Mm-hmm. And these T cells have receptors on the surface of their cells, protein receptors that have a certain shape. And this antigen is a protein that has a certain shape. And when the macrophage bumps into the T cell, the antigen hits the receptor. But those two don't match together because they aren't the right shape. The receptor has to be exactly the right shape to match the antigen. And those don't match. And these don't match. But this one matches. There's a T cell somewhere in your body that has the receptor that matches this antigen. Basically, this T cell has been waiting your entire life to kill this virus. Question?
Oh, I was just about to guess what happens next.
Oh, I'll show you. When the T cell becomes activated by the macrophage, and this might take a few days, so in the meantime you're sick from the virus. The T cell goes under a huge multiplication process. It starts to clone itself by cell division. So now the T cell is active, and the T cell will multiply and will form a host of T cells, all with the same receptor that fits that antigen. So now all of these T cells have the right receptors to fit these antigens. And there are three types: memory T cells, killer T cells, and helper T cells. and I drew little faces on them. The memory T cell is going, because it remembers. And the killer T cell is going, because it kills. And the helper T cell is smiling because it helps. Aren't my magnets cute?
Yes.
Thank you.
Adorable.
Get this out there?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what the killer T cells do first, because they're the most fun. The killer T cells will leave the lymph nodes and start roaming around, bouncing around, bumping into things. But namely, they bump into cells of your own body. Bump, 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 click. It's found a cell that's got viruses inside of it. And you know what it does to that cell?
Kills it.
It kills it. It squirts out a little chemical called a perforin
Heck.
that perforates the cell wall. Perforate means to break, to punch holes in it. And the contents then leak out of the cell. I say the cell wall, I really mean the cell membrane. Animal cells don't have a cell wall. But the contents all leak out of the cell, and the cell dies, and the viruses that it's building inside die too.
Do antibiotics do the same thing?
Sometimes antibiotics can work like that. But we're not talking about antibiotics
I
here.
know.
What makes all this stuff die?
Different antibiotics work different ways. But yeah, there are antibiotics that break down the cell wall of bacteria, and then stuff leaks out of the cell. Yeah, question?
What makes all this stuff die inside? Like, is it just because it's not held together anymore?
Well, when your cell membrane ruptures, all the contents spill out. And if a virus has recently penetrated and the cell is making more viruses, if this happens before the cell finishes making the viruses, then you don't form any viruses.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, if this were to happen, Cole, after all the viruses had been made, it wouldn't do any good. The viruses would just come out and attack more things. See,
Okay.
so this has to happen before new viruses are made.
Mhm.
So these killer T cells leave the lymph nodes, they bump into every cell in your body, and there are thousands of them, clones of the T cell. This is why your lymph nodes swell up. Because you've got all this activity going on inside your lymph nodes. And the T cells leave, they bump into every cell in your body multiple times because there's so many of them, and any one that they detect, they will kill. So that does away with all the viruses that are inside the cells. Again, this takes a week or so, so you're sick the whole time while these cells are scouring your body doing this. Every cell will be checked. Isn't that good? We've got half the job done.
So the killer T cells get rid of the bad cells and
Cells that are infected. And see, now after this cell dies, the cells next to it will multiply and a new cell will take its place. So as long as you haven't lost too many cells, you can reform all your organs.
What about the other cells, the helper? The other one?
Okay, I'm going to get to those. We still haven't done the job. We still have to kill these viruses that are floating around out here. Because they can later infect other cells and be a problem. How are we going to kill those? It's a little more difficult. One thing the helper T cells do is they go around and they spray a chemical onto all of your white blood cells and increase your white blood cell activity. They'll spray a chemical, it's called a cytokine. They'll spray cytokines onto the macrophages. And the macrophages will multiply in number so that you have a lot more of them. They'll spray cytokines onto the killer T cells. And the killer T cells will multiply. And they'll spray cytokines onto the B cells and help the B cells multiply. We'll talk about the B cells in just a minute. Are y'all with me here? It's the helper T cell that the AIDS virus destroys. The HIV virus. That's why people die from AIDS. The HIV virus kills all the helper T cells, and the immune system doesn't multiply well after that. And a person will die from some infection they get that they can't fight. Whoops. What about the memory T cells? The memory T cells hang out for the rest of your life in the lymph nodes, in the blood, millions of them. And if you ever get a virus in your body again that has this same antigen, the memory T cells will be there in mass and will destroy the viruses very quickly so that you never realize you got sick again. So memory T cells give you lasting immunity to any disease you get. Yes?
So, say a new virus comes out, something like that, and do viruses, like new viruses, like when, the bubonic plague came out, were people dying of that because...
That wasn't a virus, that was a bacteria.
Bacteria.
But new viruses do come out all the time with different antigens. But there is so much variation in the T cells that there will be some T cell with a receptor for any antigen that can possibly form. There's a way that the receptors on the T cells can vary as well. And any shape that these can come up with, your T cell receptors can come up with.
So no matter what, there will always be a T cell with the right.
Mm-hmm.
And how do some viruses kill some people?
Well, some viruses can do this so quickly
The body doesn't have time to react?
that the body can't react in time. And you lose so many cells so quickly before you fight them. Also, when you're older or a little baby, you're more susceptible. This immune response doesn't work as well. And you can have other problems like HIV or something that keeps your immune system from working. So often you can die from viruses. Yeah.
What was that movie? It was like one of those. It was like that African.
Outbreak?
Yeah, is that a virus?
That was a great
That's a virus, yeah.
So like.
Contagion also.
Yeah, but in Outbreak, like they all like died like really, really fast.
Yeah.
Next day.
The real fast-acting virus. It was both of these. Well, this one was kind of patterned after Ebola. You ever heard of Ebola? It's kind of a fast-acting virus that multiplies so fast that you lose so many cells that your immune system often can't keep up. 8 out of 10 people die from Ebola.
Who are the people who live?
Really lucky.
They have fast immune systems, strong immune systems, and they made it.
Yeah, that's what makes rabies deadly. Just watching that movie last night,
Yeah.
it was just it went so fast that it kills you before your immune system can catch up. And that's how the one girl was saved. Was they stopped it just long enough for your immune system to kill it.
Can you take a stimulant to like increase the quickness of your immune system?
I don't know. I don't know if that type of thing exists. It takes a while for all these interactions to occur. Yeah.
They say vitamin C helps your immune system. Do you know how it would help your immune
I
system?
don't know how, but I think all vitamins are things that attach to enzymes that help enzymes work. So there must be some enzymes in the immune system that the vitamin C is needed to get those enzymes working. I'm not exactly sure how that is. That's a good question too. That's something you might want to Google or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the vitamin C does.
Is there a nutrition chapter in this book, or?
There is, but it doesn't get into that much detail.
Is a sinus infection a bacteria or a virus?
It's usually a bacteria.
I have a sinus infection.
Yeah. Most infections you can take. Anything you can take an antibiotic for is bacteria. Viruses antibiotics don't work on. You have to take other medications for those. Or sometimes just let your body get over it. Okay, I need to go on and tell you about the B cell stuff. How are we going to kill all these? Caitlin, are you interested in that?
Yes.
Okay. So how are we going to do that? Well, it involves the B cells. B cells are the ultimate weapon against viruses.
Wait, why can't the
Macrophages, they can't catch them all because they're like tanks and these are like bees.
Okay.
There's just too many of these and too small. And these, they'll multiply in number, but they won't be able to catch them all. So we got to have some other weapon at our disposal, and we do. It's the ultimate weapon. It's called an antibody. You ever heard of antibodies? They're produced by B cells. And so here's what happens. To activate a B cell, it's a little bit more difficult. And so here's what happens. One of these viruses will bounce around the body and eventually will enter a lymph node. Jonathan, you with me? And in the lymph node, it'll start bumping into B cells. Now, I have put, for this discussion, I've put my T cells in one lymph node and my B cells in another. But in actuality, they're all mixed up. But here's the virus bumping into a bunch of B cells, and it eventually will bond with a B cell that has the right receptor. This B cell was made to kill this virus. And when it bumps into it, the B cell absorbs and engulfs the virus, and just like the macrophage did, displays an antigen on its surface, which I have trouble doing with my magnets. And eventually a helper T cell made to kill that same virus will come in, will bind to the B cell that has already eaten this virus, and will spray it with cytokines. And now the B cell is activated. So the B cell activation is a little bit more difficult than the T cell activation. In the T cell activation, you just had to get a macrophage that displayed the antigen to bump into it. But I'm sorry, that was the T cell activation. On the B cell activation, you have to get the virus in there and the helper T cell to spray cytokines. And now the B cell will clone itself. And bam, there's the B cell has cloned itself now. Are y'all with me here? There's two types of B cells. There's memory B cells. Guess what they do?
They remember, cells that you have that were viruses that mess with you earlier.
They hang out in your body the rest of your life, and if you ever get this virus in you again, they'll quickly activate.
But what's the thing on the outside called?
These are receptors,
What are they?
just like these.
What are the things that attach to?
Say what?
What are the little things that attach to?
These? Those are receptor proteins.
Now I'm talking about like the small magnets you have. No.
Here?
Yeah.
Antigens.
Yeah. Don't those attach to? Isn't that what they remember?
Yeah, they remember the shapes. Hold on, let me finish this and then ask your question in a minute. Okay? So one type of B cell is called memory B, and they hang out forever for the rest of your life, and they'll kill this virus. They'll help kill this virus if they ever see it again. The other type of B cell is called a plasma B cell. In the plasma B cell, all the receptors on its surface, it will release. The plasma B cell makes and releases these Y-shaped receptors. They're proteins called antibodies. And they stream away from the plasma cells by the trillions.
They just make those plasma cells?
The plasma cells make these receptors with their ribosomes and then release them instead of hanging on to them.
What are those?
They're called antibodies. These are called antibodies. And there are thousands of B cells because this original B cell multiplied, right? And made lots of these plasma B cells. And there's hundreds or thousands of them, and they all release antibodies. This is difficult. And the antibodies are released, and they come out of the lymph nodes, and they float around the body, And I've heard it described by a professor as it's almost like raining antibodies inside your body. They're everywhere. They're smaller than the viruses. And so the viruses cannot avoid these things. The antibodies stick to the viruses. They attach because they have the right receptor and will stick to the little spikes on all the viruses. And now each antibody is shaped like the letter Y, where it has two little forks here. And one fork can stick to one virus, and another fork can stick to the other virus. And so what it ends up doing is these antibodies make the viruses form big clumps. This is one way that antibodies work. Antibodies can work other ways. But one way they kill viruses is that they make the viruses all clump together. Each virus being stuck to each antibody being stuck to two different viruses. They form big clumps, and it's hard to catch bees if you're a tank, but it's easy to catch a giant clump of bees if you're a tank. And the macrophages just cruise around and eat up all these huge clumps of viruses. So these things are all cleared away because of the antibodies. So, Steph, back to address your question. If you're ever reinfected by these guys, they'll hit a memory cell, and a memory cell will immediately start making antibodies that'll kill the virus quickly. And the killer T cells are constantly searching the body for the rest of your life, bumping into cells, and if it ever bumps into one that's been invaded by a virus, it'll quickly destroy it. So you'll never get sick from this virus again.
So like one of your cells can never get like sick twice. Or I guess your cells are like
Okay? Killer T cells constantly patrol your body. Helper T cells constantly going around, helping white blood cells divide. If they ever see the virus again, the memory cells will take back over.
Is monovirus?
Mononucleosis, that's a virus.
So you can only get it once?
What's that?
So you can only get it once?
Yes.
Well, you can get
That's
it.
right, but you can get different types if it mutates. Now, I don't know if the virus that causes I think it's a virus.
Because I've gotten the stomach virus twice in my life.
It's probably a different
The
type.
doctor told me I had mono and I wouldn't get it again, so.
Yeah, I had mono.
I can't remember what mono is.
If you get mono
I thought it was a virus.
I thought if you get full blown mono that you'd be
But the cold, how many times have you had the cold, Steph? How many times have you had the cold?
Do I start
It's different colds.
I have a sinus infection.
What?
All right, you got to read 33.4.